When I lifted the phone to ask my son Daniel about the date of his wedding, my daughter-in-law Ivy fixed her eyes on mine and, with an icy smile, said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words struck me like a bucket of frozen water. Special people. For over 3 years, I had paid their $500 monthly rent, bought every stick of furniture in their home, and stocked their refrigerator whenever they ran out of food. And yet, I was not one of those special people. I stood motionless in the living room of my own house, holding the phone as though it weighed 1,000 pounds, watching my son avoid my eyes while Ivy lounged on the sofa I had purchased for them. The soft rose-colored dress I had chosen for her wedding now hung uselessly in my closet beside the new shoes and the illusion that I would share in the happiest day of my only child's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, picturing how radiant I would look in Daniel's wedding photos, pictures that would never include me. For weeks, I had organized every little detail. I had set aside $1,000 as their wedding gift. I had phoned my sister Susan in Chicago to tell her the joyful news. I had scrubbed my house from ceiling to floor, imagining that after the ceremony, they might stop by to celebrate. All those hopeful plans collapsed in an instant, shattered by 4 poisoned words, "Only special people." Daniel finally looked up, his voice strangely rehearsed. "Mom." It was an intimate ceremony, just us and a couple of witnesses. But I knew he was lying. I had seen the photos on social media, Ivy's parents smiling proudly beside the newlyweds, her siblings raising glasses of champagne. And there was her wedding gown, pure white, the very one I had unknowingly helped fund with the $800 personal expense I had given her the month before. I saw everything I was never meant to see. Exactly 7 days after that humiliation, Ivy called again, her voice transformed. The confidence that had once excluded me was gone. Now she sounded desperate, almost pleading. "Margaret, the rent is overdue. The landlord's threatening to evict us. You forgot to send the transfer?" Her voice quivered, as though the world might end. I paused, remembering all the times I had rushed to the bank to make that payment, all the days I had canceled my own plans to ensure they had a roof above their heads, all the nights I had eaten beans and rice so they could have what they wanted. And now, after cutting me out of the most important moment of their lives, they had the audacity to call as if nothing had happened. "Evie," I said, my tone calm too, calm. "Didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence that followed was so heavy I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, the trembling wasn't mine, it was hers. "Margaret, I don't understand," she stammered. "We've always been special to you. You're like a second mom to me." Lies. All lies. Coded in that sugary voice she reserved for moments when she needed something, the same voice she'd used when asking for money for her dress, for the honeymoon, for the rings I helped pay for, never knowing I'd never witnessed them being exchanged. For years I had lived as if walking on eggshells, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping for the tiniest crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the compliant mother-in-law, the quiet provider who never complained even when they treated me as invisible. But that phrase, "only special people," awakened something long dormant inside me. I began to calculate in my mind how much I had spent on them over those 3 years. Between rent, groceries, gifts, emergencies, and their endless whims, it exceeded $20,000 money drawn from my retirement fund, my savings, and the inheritance my late husband Edward had left me, so I could live my final years in peace. And for what to be treated like a stranger on my own son's wedding day. That night, after hanging up, I sat on my bed and cried, not tears of sorrow, but of rage and exhaustion. I wept for every year of humiliation I had swallowed in silence, For every moment they made me feel that my love was a burden, my presence an inconvenience, my money the only thing of value I possessed. I cried for the foolish mother I had been, for the woman who had lost herself trying to be indispensable to those who saw her as disposable. When I awoke the next morning, something in me had shifted. It was not just pain, it was resolve, cold and absolute. I rose and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. The same weary eyes, the same wrinkles that told the story of years spent giving without receiving, but now there was something new behind my gaze, a hard edge I did not recognize. A determination buried for decades beneath obedience. I went to the kitchen and brewed coffee, as I had every morning for 40 years. But this time, I didn't think of calling Daniel to ask how he had slept. I didn't check my phone hoping for an apology that would never come. For the first time in forever, I was my own first priority. I sat at the same dining table where I had once planned surprises for them, counted bills for their expenses, and silently cried after their indifference. Today, that table would witness something entirely different. I opened my checkbook, spread out my bank statements, and began to do the math, wanting to see the exact extent of my foolishness. Rent, $500 a month for 36 months, $18,000. Groceries and household supplies around $200 monthly, $7,200 more. Gifts for birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays at least $3,000. Medical emergencies, $800. Unpaid car loan, $2,500. Air conditioner repair, $600. Living room furniture, $1,200. Altogether, $33,400, the exact sum of my generosity. That was the amount I had drained from my husband's inheritance, from my pension, from decades of disciplined saving, squandered to keep two adults comfortable. Two people incapable of even pretending to respect me. The phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Once, my heart would have raced as I ran to answer, hoping he'd finally apologize, explain that it had all been a misunderstanding. This time, I let it ring once, twice, 3 times until it stopped. I sipped my coffee and felt nothing. 10 minutes later, it rang again. Ivy this time. I let it ring as well. Then came a text from Daniel Mom. Please answer. We need to talk. I deleted it without a second thought. At 2 o'clock that afternoon, I decided to go for a walk, something I hadn't done in months, unless it was for their errands to the bank for transfers, the supermarket for their groceries, the pharmacy for Ivy's medications. Today, I walked simply because I wanted to. I passed the park where I used to take Daniel as a child. I remembered that sweet boy who hugged me tightly and called me the best mother in the world. When had he become a man who treated me like an ATM with feelings? When had I begun confusing love with money? Believing I had to purchase my own son's affection, I stopped outside the bank where I had made countless transfers. Through the glass, Mr. Harper, the branch manager, spotted me and waved. He had processed every payment to Daniel and Ivy. He had watched my balance shrink month after month to fill theirs. I went inside and walked straight to his office. Mr. Harper, I said, I need to cancel all the automatic transfers I've scheduled. He looked up, surprised. For 3 years. Those payments have been as regular as the sunrise. Are you certain? Mrs. Hale, did something happen? His concern was genuine, more genuine than anything my son had shown me in months. What happened? I replied. Is that I finally opened my eyes. Cancel everything. And please tell me how to secure my accounts. I don't want anyone else touching my money. While he processed the cancellations, my phone kept buzzing Daniel. Ivy. Daniel again. It was as though they had radar that sensed their source of income was in danger. I powered the phone off completely when Mr. Harper handed me the paperwork. He hesitated. "Mrs. Hale, forgive me for saying this, but I've watched you be incredibly generous with your family over the years. I just hope no one's forcing you to do this." His words pierced me deeply. This man, who knew me only through numbers and transactions, showed more real concern for me than my own child. "I'm not being pressured, Mr. Harper," I said quietly. "For once, I've stopped pressuring myself." As I left the bank, I felt astonishingly light, as though I had set down a massive weight in that office. For the first time in years, my money and my life belonged entirely to me. No more obligations to people who saw me as a resource instead of a person. On the way home, I thought of all the things I had denied myself to keep Daniel and Ivy happy, the trips I never took, the friends I stopped seeing because I was always available for their emergencies, the hobbies I'd abandoned because every dollar spent on myself was one less for them. When I reached my house, 3 cars were parked out front Daniel's, Ivy's, and one I didn't recognize. Through the window, I could see movement inside. My blood went cold. They had keys because I had trusted them, believing that someday they would care for me as I had cared for them. I drew a deep breath before turning the knob. It was time for the first real confrontation of my new life. I opened the door and froze. Daniel sat on my sofa with his head in his hands. Ivy paced like a caged animal, and an older man I had never seen was rifling through papers on my dining table. My papers? My personal documents. "What is happening here?" I demanded, my voice louder than I expected. All 3 turned to stare at me, as though I were the intruder. Ivy spoke first, her tone carrying that same false urgency I had heard on the phone. "Margaret, thank God you're here. We need to talk. This is Dr. Pierce from the law firm. We consulted about your situation." "My situation?" I asked, calm but cutting. "What situation? I'm perfectly fine." Daniel finally raised his eyes that once belonged to a gentle boy but now glimmered only with financial panic. "Mom, we went to the bank. They said you canceled all the transfers and blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you do that, Dr. Pierce." A man in his 50s dressed in a gray suit and wearing a practiced smile that inspired no confidence stepped toward me with an extended hand. "Mrs. Hale, I'm Dr. Pierce, a family law attorney. Your children are worried about your mental well-being and asked me to evaluate the situation." I ignored his hand, walked straight to the table, and gathered my documents. "These are my private papers. You have no right to handle them without my permission." "Mom!" Daniel interjected in the condescending tone he had perfected in recent years. "We're just concerned. You've been acting strangely. First you cut us off financially with no explanation. Then you ignore our calls. We think you might need professional help." Ivy moved closer, trying to take my hand with that fake tenderness she always used when she needed something. "Margaret, sweetheart, we know you've been under stress. Maybe loneliness is affecting you more than you realize. At your age, confusion isn't uncommon." That word confusion rang like an alarm in my head. Now I understood why they had brought a lawyer. This wasn't about concern. It was about declaring me incompetent and seizing control of my finances. The same woman who had once said only special people was now treating me like a senile fool. "I am not confused," I said firmly, my voice slicing through the room. "I am clearer than I've been in years. And you are going to leave my house right now, Dr. Pierce raised his hand slightly, adopting the soothing tone lawyers use when pretending to be reasonable. "Mrs. Hale, I understand you're upset, but your children have the right to intervene. if they believe your ability to manage finances is impaired. They've noted several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors, I laughed harsh. Almost cruel. Like what? Deciding that my own money belongs to me? Refusing to fund the lives of two adults who treat me like garbage. Ivy flinched as if struck. We've never treated you badly. You're part of this family. Everything you have will be ours one day anyway. We're just accelerating the process. There, it was the naked truth. In their minds, I was already dead. They were merely collecting the inheritance in advance. Whether I had 70 years or 70 days left didn't matter. To them, I was just a walking ATM that had become inconvenient. Out, I said, pointing to the door. All three of you out of my house. Daniel stood, face twisted in that childish anger he used to show when he didn't get his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed. You can't just cut us off overnight. Can't I? My voice finally rose. Who says I can't? For years I paid rent, not even in my name. I filled the refrigerator in a home where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Doctor. Pierce took a folder from his briefcase and laid it on the table. Mrs. Hale, we've prepared some documents that could simplify this transition. A power of attorney allowing Daniel and Ivy to manage your finances until you feel better. I grabbed the folder and, without even glancing inside, hurled it into the trash. The only transition happening here is yours to the front door. Ivy began to cry, not tears of grief, but of frustrated rage. You can't do this to us. Margaret, we depended on you. We planned our lives around your support. We made commitments built on my money. I shot back. Not on my happiness. Not on my company. Not on my well-being, just on my money. And now that I've chosen to use it for myself, suddenly, I'm a confused old woman in need of guardianship. Daniel moved toward me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the frightened little boy who ran into my arms at night. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as an obstacle between him and a life of unearned comfort. Mom, memot mistakes, he said, feigning remorse. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Ivy was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this if you just be reasonable again. Reasonable. The word burned on my tongue. To be reasonable means continuing to fund your life while you treat me like a stranger to pretend it doesn't hurt, that you excluded me from the most important day of my only child's life. Doctor. Pierce began packing his documents with professional efficiency. Mrs. Hale, this isn't over. Your family has legal recourse. If you're making irrational financial decisions due to mental decline, a judge can assign guardianship. His words hit like a slap. I realized this wasn't merely manipulation, it was a genuine legal threat. Dr. Pierce, I said, locking eyes with him. You might want to review your facts before threatening a 71-year-old woman who has flawlessly managed her finances for 40 years, who raised her son alone after her husband's death, who kept a household and worked honorably until retirement, and who, until last week, financially supported two fully capable adults. Ivy stopped crying, her face hardening to reveal her true self. This isn't over. Margaret, she hissed. We have rights and lawyers. Too. Perfect, I replied. Hire as many as you want with your own money. Mine is no longer available for your tantrums. The three of them walked toward the door, their pride wounded, unaccustomed to hearing the word no. Before leaving, Daniel turned once more. Mom, this is going to end badly for you. You'll end up alone, with no one to take care of you when you need it. Daniel, I said softly but with unshakable clarity, I'm already alone. The only difference now is that it's by choice, not by your neglect. As the door closed behind them, I stood in the middle of my living room, enveloped in the most beautiful silence I had heard in years, the silence of freedom. That night, I couldn't sleep, not from sadness or regret, but from the electric adrenaline of reclaiming control over my own life. I lay awake, eyes on the dark ceiling, mapping out my next moves like a commander drawing lines on a battle plan. If Daniel and Ivy wanted a fight, I would give them a war, one led by clear thinking rather than by wounded feelings. By 6 o'clock in the morning, I was already dressed, shoes on, purse in hand. My first stop was the office of my attorney, Mr. Lawson, a man I had met years earlier while settling Edward's will. Unlike Dr. Pierce, the smooth talker Daniel and Ivy had paraded into my dining room, Mr. Lawson carried an impeccable reputation and focused his practice on safeguarding the rights of older adults. Mrs. Hale, he said after hearing me out, what your children tried yesterday is far more common than most people realize. It has a name: elder financial abuse, and it is a federal crime. The fact that they entered your home without permission and sifted through your private paperwork is also a violation. His words comforted and alarmed me at once. Comforted, because they affirmed I was not imagining things. Alarmed, because they revealed the true gravity of the situation. We need to document absolutely everything. Mr. Lawson continued. Each transfer, every gift, anytime they pressured you for money. We will also revise your will so your assets are protected against future manipulation. We spent 3 hours combing through my accounts. When he calculated the total, he gave a low whistle: $33,400 in 3 years. Mrs. Hale, he said gently, that amount could have funded comfortable living, travel, and a generous retirement. Instead, it subsidized 2 adults who did not even respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. I walked out with a full action list. First, replace every lock on my house. Second, install a complete security system with cameras to deter surprise visits. Third, open a fresh account at a bank with no ties to them. And fourth, begin living the life I had been postponing for years. My next destination was the hardware store. The owner, Mr. Rowan, he knew me by name because I had so often bought supplies to fix Daniel and Ivy's apartment. This time, the purchase was for me, Mrs. Hale. He greeted, half teasing, another emergency for your son. He spoke with the easy familiarity of someone who had watched my generosity drain away. Not today, Mr. Rowan, I said. This is for my house. I want every lock changed, and I want the best you carry. He raised his brows, but asked no questions, while I compared deadbolts. His son Caleb, who installs security systems, came in from a job. Providence could not have timed it better. Caleb, I said. I also need exterior and interior cameras, full coverage. Price is not the issue. They scheduled the installation for the next day. As I stepped outside, a call from an unknown number lit my screen. I had blocked Ivy's line after our confrontation, so of course she was borrowing someone else's. Margaret, it's Ivy. Please don't hang up. Let's speak like civilized adults. Go ahead, I replied, flat as stone. Look, I get that you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Daniel and I want to make it up to you. How about a special dinner to celebrate with you? We can do it at your place, cook together like before. The manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. Evie, I asked, exactly how much rent do you owe? Silence hummed on the line. Well, 2 months, $1,000 total. But that is not the only reason I called. Margaret, we miss you. We miss having you in our lives. Do you miss me? I asked. Or do you miss my money both? She admitted, startlingly frank. I will not lie to you. We need your help. But we love you. 2. You matter to us. If I matter? I said evenly. Why did I not matter enough to be at your wedding? Why do I not matter enough to receive a call that is not about money? When was the last time you rang just to ask how I am? The pause that followed answered for her. Never. I said, listen clearly. And I will only say this once. For 3 years you have treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me, ignored me, humiliated me, and finally insulted me in the worst way. Now that the cash is drying up, you suddenly remember you love me. Margaret, please. There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I was not special enough for your ceremony. Now I am making mine. I ended the call and powered the phone off. Nothing and no one would interrupt my day of liberation. That afternoon, I walked into the salon I had avoided for over a year, time after time. I had canceled appointments because Daniel or Ivy had a crisis, or because the money I set aside for myself magically turned into their emergency. Mrs. Hale, my favorite stylist Naomi, called out. What a lovely surprise. I thought you had forgotten us. I did not forget you, Naomi, I said with a small smile. I forgot that I deserve care. 2. I booked the full treatment cut. Color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without a single twinge of guilt. As Naomi worked, she chatted softly about her kids and her plans. It felt new and bright to have a conversation that did not orbit Daniel and Ivy's needs. When she finished, she stepped back and beamed. You look beautiful, Mrs. Hale, but more than that, you look free. Did something wonderful happen, yes? I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. I finally learned how to say no. When I returned home, a car I did not recognize was idling by the curb. My heart kicked once, were Daniel and Ivy back with reinforcements, but then I saw an older woman seated on my porch steps. Mrs. Hale, she asked as I got out. Yes. Can I help you? I am Helen Brooks. I live next door. We have been neighbors for years but hardly spoken. Yesterday, I heard shouting from your house and worried. Is everything all right? Her straightforward kindness struck me deeper than I expected. Here was a near stranger showing more care for me than my own son. Come in, Mrs. Brooks, I said. I will make coffee and tell you a story you will hardly believe. While the kettle simmered, I told her everything. Helen listened without interruption, nodding now and then. When I finished, her eyes were wet. Mrs. Hale, she said gently, you did the right thing. I went through something similar with my daughter 5 years ago. I thought it was my duty to bankroll her adult life, and I feared she would not love me if I stopped. What happened? I cut off the money once I realized she called only when she needed something. The beginning was terrible guilt, threats, emotional blackmail. But after 6 months, she phoned to apologize for real. Now we have a relationship built on love, not on cash. Her story steadied me. Do you think Daniel and Ivy will understand one day? Maybe yes. Maybe no. She answered honestly. Either way, that is no longer your responsibility. Mrs. Hale, your job now is to live your own life. That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without fretting about whether they had rent money, groceries, or funds for whims. I fell asleep thinking about my plans and my future, and slept better than I had in years. The next morning, right at 8 o'clock, Caleb and Miss Rowan arrived to change the locks and install the security system. My phone kept lighting with calls from unfamiliar numbers, Ivy trying different lines, yet I had acquired a valuable new skill, ignoring anything that did not serve my peace. Mrs. Hale, Caleb said as he mounted a camera. This setup will give you real peace of mind. You can check visitors from your phone, even when you are away. And if anyone enters without permission, the system alerts the police automatically. The irony did not escape me. I was fortifying my home against my own child. It hurt less than before. It felt simply like a necessary step to protect my newfound calm. While the drills hummed, I did something I had postponed for far too long. I called my sister Susan in Chicago. We had drifted because every conversation had turned into a ledger updates on Daniel and Ivy. Totals of what I had spent. Boasts I mistook for pride. "Margaret," she answered. Startled. "Sister, how are you? We have not spoken in months." "I am well." "Susan, better than well. I am calling to tell you I have finally come to my senses." I described everything, the secret ceremony, the humiliation, the lawyer in my dining room, and my decision to end the funding. Susan listened without a sound. When I finished, her reply surprised me. It was time. "Sister, each call broke my heart when you treated money like proof of love. I wanted to tell you, but I did not know how." "Tell me what?" "That when I saw Daniel at family gatherings, he never spoke about you with warmth. It was always, 'My mom paid for this,' or 'My mom bought that.' Never, 'I miss my mom,' or 'I love my mom.' You had become a service provider, not a person." The truth stung, but it was the kind of sting that cleanses. "There is something else," Susan added. "Ivy always talked about you in the future tense, when Margaret is no longer here. We will remodel her house. Or, once we inherit, we will invest in the business." It sounded as if they were waiting for you to disappear so they could finally live. Her words hit like a bucket of ice water. They did not merely see me as an ATM. They saw me as a temporary obstacle between them and my money. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table, absorbing those revelations. Years with a husband who truly loved me. 35 years raising my son alone after Edward died. And 3 years funding 2 adults who viewed me as a $100,000 hurdle. The doorbell rang. On the new camera feed, I saw Helen holding a mug. I opened the door and she handed me fresh coffee. "Thought you might welcome company after yesterday," she said with the sincere smile I had already come to value. We settled in the living room and she shared more of her story. "My daughter used the same lines Ivy uses on you. You are like a second mom to me. We are special to you. Everything will be ours one day." Those are scripted phrases. Mrs. Hale. They come from the Handbook of Emotional Manipulation. "Does such a handbook exist?" I asked. Half joking. "Not officially." Halen chuckled. "But everyone seems to read from it." Chapter 1. Make her feel indispensable. Chapter 2. Manufacture constant financial emergencies. Chapter 3. If she resists. Question. Her mental health. We laughed then, a bitter little laugh, because it was both ridiculous and tragic to recognize our children in such tired patterns. "Did you feel guilty when you stopped paying?" I asked. "Every single day for the first 3 months," she said. Then the outcomes appeared. My daughter got a second job. Her husband put down the golf clubs and found extra work. They learned to live within their means. Most importantly, they learned I am a person, not a resource. That afternoon, I finally did what I had avoided. For years, I visited Edward's grave. I had always found an excuse Daniel or Ivy needed something. The taxi fare would be better used for their emergencies. The cemetery was quiet and lovely. His headstone looked a little neglected. Months had passed since I had been by to tidy it. I sat in the grass and spoke aloud as if he were beside me. "Edward, my love, I think I lost myself for a while. After you were gone, I poured everything into Daniel. I tried to be the perfect mother to fill the empty space. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to be myself. A soft breeze stirred the trees. And for a heartbeat, I felt heard. Our son is someone I barely recognize. Or perhaps he was always like this, and I refused to see it. As for his wife, you can imagine the money you left for me to live peacefully, I spent on them. But not anymore. I have learned. I cleaned the stone, replaced the withered flowers, and lingered for another hour, soaking in the quiet. For once, I was not rushing home to solve Daniel and Ivy's crisis. When I pulled into my driveway, 3 cars lined the curb again. My pulse jumped. But this time I was ready. The cameras showed Daniel, Evie, and 2 unfamiliar people. They pointed at my house, talking quickly, clearly agitated. I stayed in the car and called Mr. Lawson. "They are here again," I said. "And they have brought others. Do not get out," he instructed. "I am on my way. And I am calling the police." After our meeting yesterday, I requested a temporary restraining order. "They are not permitted on your property." Minutes later, Mr. Lawson arrived with 2 patrol cars. I watched officers speak with Daniel and Ivy, saw my son gesturing wildly, saw Ivy cry again and felt nothing. An officer approached my window. "Ma'am, you can step out safely. Your visitors will be leaving now." As I opened the door, Daniel shouted from the street, "Mom, this is ridiculous. We are your family. You cannot call the police on your own son." "Family," I answered. My voice steady. "Does not threaten to have their mother declared incompetent. Family does not invade her home without permission. Family does not treat her like an ATM. You will pay us everything you owe," Ivy screamed. "You co-signed bills, you cannot abandon us." Mr. Lawson cut in firmly. "Any future communication must go through my office. And before you make another collection threat, I suggest you consult counsel. My client has thorough documentation of every voluntary payment over 3 years." I watched them drive off thwarted, for now. But not finished, even so. For the first time since this started, I felt genuine confidence. I had competent legal help, the emotional steadiness of Helen's friendship, and most importantly, clarity about right and wrong. That evening, Helen invited me for dinner. I met her visiting daughter, and up close. What a healthy family looks like: respectful voices, sincere questions, easy laughter. Not once did the daughter ask for money. I wanted that with Daniel. I confessed after she left, "Maybe you still can." Helen said softly, "But first he must learn that you are a person worthy of respect, not merely a source of income." I went to bed that night with a small, sturdy hope. The next few days passed in a strange calm. The cameras recorded Daniel and Ivy cruising by several times a day, sometimes creeping along, sometimes parking for a few minutes without getting out. It looked like reconnaissance, as if they were studying my movements for the next attempt. On Mr. Lawson's advice, I kept a meticulous log with dates and times. "Their persistence will help us," he had said. "Each appearance after a no-contact warning strengthens the case for a permanent restraining order." On Friday morning, I was eating breakfast unhurriedly when the doorbell sounded. The feed showed a sharply dressed young woman, folder in hand, professional smile in place. I did not recognize her, but her posture signaled this was not a neighborly call. "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret Hale," she said when I opened the door. "I am a social investigator with the Office of Senior Services. We received a report that you may be at risk, and I need to conduct a wellness check." My blood went cold. Daniel and Ivy had escalated again beyond private attorneys to government channels. "May I see your identification?" I asked. working to keep my voice even. Of course. She displayed an official badge that looked authentic. I am Ems Delgado, a social worker. May I come in to speak with you? I stepped aside, knowing refusal could be twisted against me. Ems Delgado settled on my sofa and pulled a form from her folder. Mrs. Hale, she began. We received reports of significant changes in your financial behavior, of cut-off communication with family, and of apparent paranoia such as installing unnecessary security systems. We were also informed that you have refused medical and legal help from your loved ones. Every line had been crafted to paint me as a confused, unstable old woman. I could hear Ivy's fingerprints in the wording. She had always known how to twist language to get what she wanted. Ems Delgado, I said, summoning every ounce of dignity. I would like to call my attorney before answering any questions. Ma'am, this is not a legal interrogation. It is a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, speaking with me should not be a problem. That phrase, if you have nothing to hide, ignited my fury. Abusers love that logic. If you are innocent, why object to having your privacy violated, miss? I am calling my lawyer. You may wait here or return another day. But I will not answer questions without legal counsel present. I phoned Mr. Lawson, and he arrived within 20 minutes. When he stepped in and saw the social worker, his expression went flint hard. Ems Delgado, he said, after inspecting her identification. I trust you have a court order, because my client is represented by counsel, and any unauthorized probing is harassment. Sir, Ems Delgado replied, her confidence dimming. We received reports from concerned family members about the lady's well-being. It is our duty to investigate. What family, Mr. Lawson asked. Dry as dust. The same family who tried to push a power of attorney on her without representation. The same family who entered her home without permission and rifled through private documents. The same family who excluded her from major life events while living off her money. He set a folder on the table. Here is full documentation of my client's financial and emotional abuse. $33,400 bled from her accounts over 3 years, plus systematic exclusion and ongoing emotional blackmail. If anyone merits investigation, it is not my client. Ems Delgado paged through the exhibits, growing visibly uneasy. It was clear the story she had been handed did not match the facts before her. Mrs. Hale, she said at last, can you explain why you abruptly stopped financially supporting your son because I finally realized I was being used? I answered plainly, because I understood that, to them, I was not a mother, I was a bank account. Because I was done funding the lives of people who viewed me as an obstacle. But do you not feel responsible for helping your family? She pressed. Ems Delgado, I said, heat rising. My responsibility as a mother was to raise my child to adulthood, to educate him and give him the tools to be independent. My son is 35 years old, married, and perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my obligation, it is my choice. And I have chosen to stop. Mr. Lawson added, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old to be unable to cover his own rent without help from his 71-year-old mother, Ems? Delgado did not answer immediately. I watched her reassess everything. Mrs. Hale, she asked, after a pause. Do you manage your finances on your own? I do, and I can show you bank statements, investments, tax filings. Everything is current and orderly. I live independently. As you can see, I keep my home clean, care for myself, drive my own car, and maintain healthy relationships with my neighbors. As for medications, just vitamins and the occasional aspirin, I have no conditions requiring prescriptions. My client, Mr. Lawson said, also completed extensive medical evaluations as part of our legal preparation. She is in excellent physical and mental health. Ms. Delgado closed her folder. Mrs. Hale, she said, based on this conversation and the documentation reviewed, I see no sign you are at risk or in need of intervention. I will close the case. After she left, Mr. Lawson and I sat in silence for a few moments. Margaret, he said finally, this will continue to escalate. Daniel and Ivy are spending money. They do not have to hire professionals and try to have you declared incompetent. Does that mean they are desperate? Precisely. Their next move could be a formal incompetency petition. It is costly and difficult to win. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify for them, they might secure a court-appointed guardian. The thought chilled me. They could take control of my money. They can try, he said. Steady. We have strong evidence of your competency and of their financial motives. We will fight. That afternoon, I called Susan to let off steam. Sister, she said after listening, do you see how far they are willing to go for money? They are gambling family bonds, paying lawyers and doctors, and shredding their reputations just to get back into your bank account. Her words sank deep. Daniel and Ivy had fully revealed who they were. There would be no return. Not genuine reconciliation. I had never been a mother or respected mother-in-law in their eyes, only money on legs. The realization hurt and freed me at once. I no longer questioned my choices or felt guilty for protecting myself. They had proven that my well-being mattered less to them than my cash. That evening, Helen arrived with a surprise. She had invited her garden club friends to meet me. Margaret, she said, these are my friends Naomi, whom you know from the salon, and Julia, Carmen, and Alfreda. We had all-weathered versions of the same Storm family who used love as leverage. We traded stories. Julia had drawn boundaries with a brother who constantly begged for money. Carmen had ended contact with a daughter who only visited when she needed cash. Alfreda had rewritten her will after learning her grandchildren viewed her as their retirement plan. What hurts most, I confessed, is not losing the money. It is realizing the love I believed in was never there. Margaret, Alfreda said with her 80 years of wisdom, real love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Her words soothed my bruised heart. She was right. I had purchased attention, not love. I had financed an illusion. You know what I have learned, I told them. Loneliness in a house full of people who do not love you is worse than solitude. At least now. When I am alone, I am in good company. We laughed, then raised our glasses to hard-won clarity. Later, after they left, I sat in my garden. The stars looked brighter, or perhaps my eyes were finally clear. For the first time in my adult life, I was completely alone, financially, no dependencies, no obligations to anyone but myself. Instead of frightening me, that truth thrilled me. I could travel when I wished, remodel my home, buy myself something lovely, donate to causes that mattered, invest in my own future instead of underwriting the present of ungrateful people. Freedom tasted like hope. For the first time in years, I wanted to plan. About 1 month after the social worker's visit, I believed I had finally won. I slipped into a gentle routine, unhurried breakfasts with the newspaper, time in the garden, lunches with Helen or a new friend, and long afternoons returning to passions I had abandoned. I even began painting again, something I loved before I became Daniel and Ivy's private financier. Then, on a Thursday morning, while I was brushing flowers onto my new easel, Mr. Lawson arrived with a look that made my blood run cold. Margaret, we need to talk. Daniel and Ivy have filed a formal incompetency action in family court. They are asking the court to assign you a legal guardian. The words struck like stones. I had known it was possible, but hearing it aloud made it terrifyingly real. Does that mean they can take control of my money? If a judge finds you unable to manage your affairs? Yes. He could appoint Daniel as guardian, giving him full control of your finances. I sank onto the sofa, crushed by the deepest betrayal of my life. My own son trying to brand me incompetent in order to seize my assets. Mr. Lawson, what evidence could they possibly have? You yourself know I am fully competent. They have statements from 3 supposed witnesses who claim erratic behavior. He said. They also submitted alleged unpaid medical bills and claims that you hoard medications you do not take. But that is false. I have no outstanding bills, and certainly no hoarded prescriptions. I know, Margaret, but they fabricated documents that look convincing. They also included an affidavit from Dr. Lehman, asserting you refused to cooperate with psychiatric evaluation, which they spin as proof of decline. The maneuver was diabolical, twisting my refusal to submit to an unnecessary exam into evidence of illness, turning self-protection into supposed incapacity. Who are the 3 witnesses? He checked the file. Evie. Of course. A neighbor named Mr. Whitaker. And someone claiming to be your pharmacist, Miss Patel. Whitaker lived across the street. A sour man who resented it when my friends parked near his curb. Mr. Patel truly was my pharmacist, which made his supposed statement baffling. I need to speak to Mr. Patel, I said. Something is off. We went to the pharmacy that afternoon. Mr. Patel greeted me with startled nerves. Mrs. Hale. Good to see you. How are you? Mr. Patel. I have been told you signed a statement claiming I behave erratically with medications. His face flushed scarlet. Mrs. Hale. Your daughter-in-law came in some weeks ago asking about your prescriptions. She said she was worried because you were acting strangely. And what did you tell her? I explained you buy only vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you have no regular prescriptions, but she insisted that proved you were not caring for your health. Mr. Lawson cut in. Mr. Patel. Did you sign something? She presented a paper stating I was confirming irregular medication purchases. I thought it was for insurance or some health form. I did not know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been duped into signing a document he did not fully grasp. Ivy's manipulation had no ceiling. Mr. Patel, I said, I need a written statement explaining exactly what happened and clarifying that I have no medication issues. Of course. Mrs. Hale, I am very sorry for the misunderstanding. From there, we visited Mr. Whitaker. He opened the door, bristling. What do you want, Mr. Whitaker? Mr. Lawson began. We understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior. I did. He snapped. That woman is crazy. She has been acting strange for weeks. Could you specify what you observed installing cameras, like she lives in a war zone, having strangers over constantly, yelling at her family in the street? I realized he had yanked events out of context. The cameras were for safety. The strangers were new friends. The shouting was me defending my home from Daniel and Ivy's intrusions. Mr. Whitaker, I asked, do you know why I installed the cameras? No, and I do not care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law who entered my home without permission and threatened me. That is exactly what a crazy person would say. He sneered. There was no reasoning with him. His statement rested on shallow observations intentionally misread. That evening, Mr. Lawson and I sketched our defense. Margaret, we need our own independent psychiatric evaluation, he said. I trust Dr. Moore, She is an expert on capacity and will provide an objective assessment. What if Daniel and Ivy manage to sway the judge? What if none of this matters, and they have already decided to brand me incompetent? The system is imperfect. He conceded, but not entirely corrupt. We have solid evidence of your competence and documentation of their financial motives. We will fight. The next day I met Dr. Moore, a woman in her 50s, with kind, keen eyes. Mrs. Hale, she said, I will ask a series of questions and give you several tests. Take your time and answer honestly. For 2 hours, she examined memory, reasoning, financial understanding, and emotional health. She administered cognitive tasks, then had me solve math and logic problems. Mrs. Hale, she concluded, your results are well above average for your age. You are not only competent, your cognitive function is excellent. Doctor, why would my family do this, based on your account and the records I reviewed? This looks like classic elder financial exploitation. Sadly, it is more common than most people know. I left buoyed by professional validation, yet saddened by the necessity of the fight. That afternoon, Helen gathered our garden club friends for an emergency meeting. When I told them about the petition, the room erupted. Margaret, Julia said, we will testify for you. We have seen you day after day. Anyone can tell you are thriving. Better than thriving. Naomi added, you are clearer and stronger than many women. Half your age, Alfreda, with her 80 years of perspective, squeezed my hands. My dear, what your children are attempting is nothing new. For generations, greedy offspring have tried to declare their parents insane to get the money. But you have what many victims lacked: documentation, legal support, and friends ready to stand beside you. Hope rose in my chest. I was not alone. I had a circle of strong women who had witnessed my transformation. You know the saddest truth, I said. Daniel and Ivy are willing to destroy any chance of future reconciliation for money. Even if I could forgive the rest, this crosses a line. Maybe that clarity is a gift. Naomi replied softly, now you know exactly who they are, and you can act accordingly. That night, for the first time since the nightmare began, I wept in earnest, not from simple sorrow, but from grief. I said goodbye to the sun I thought I had, to the dream of a loving family, to the illusion that unconditional love had been returned, and alongside the grief came a resolve not to surrender my savings, my dignity, or my freedom. The war was now official, and I was ready. 3 weeks later, the hearing arrived. I woke early, put on my sharpest black suit, and looked in the mirror with a determination I had never felt. Today was not only about my mental capacity, it was about my dignity, my right to live free of abuse, my value beyond a balance sheet. Mr. Lawson arrived at 7 in the morning to review our plan one last time. Margaret, remember, the burden of proof is theirs. They must prove incompetence. We only have to show the truth. And if the judge is already biased, Judge Hathaway is known to be fair. I reviewed prior rulings. He does not automatically side with relatives and is committed to protecting older adults. We reached the courthouse at 9 o'clock. In the hallway, I saw Daniel in a new suit likely purchased for the occasion, and Ivy in black, as if attending a funeral. Perhaps it was the funeral of our family bond. When our eyes met, Daniel looked away. Ivy held my gaze. Cool and transactional, as if this were merely business. Their lawyer was an older, polished man with the self-assurance of someone who had won cases like this before. When he began his opening statement, his tactic was plain. Portray me as a confused elder manipulated by strangers who had turned me against a loving family. Your Honor, he intoned, solemn as stone. Mrs. Margaret Hale has exhibited a clear mental decline in recent months from her loved ones. Each sentence had been engineered to recast my self-assertion as senility and my liberty as outside manipulation. Then they called witnesses. Ivy took the stand first, delivering a performance worthy of an award. She wept while describing how I had supposedly transformed, how I had turned hostile and paranoid, how I had isolated myself from the family that adored me. "Your Honor," she said, voice quavering, "Margaret has always been like a second mother to me. Watching her mental decline has been devastating. We only want to help her receive the care she needs." Lies dressed up in convincing tears. Under Mr. Lawson's cross-examination, the seams began to show. "Mrs. Carter Hale," he asked evenly, "when was the last time you phoned my client without asking for money?" Ivy faltered. "Well, we always talked about lots of things." "A specific date?" "Please, I do not recall exact dates." "Is it true that you and your husband married without inviting my client?" "It was a very small ceremony." "And is it true that when my client asked about the wedding, you told her you had invited only special people?" Color rose to Ivy's face. "Those words were taken out of context." "What possible context justifies telling your mother-in-law she is not a special person?" She had no credible answer. Daniel followed. Watching him swear to tell the truth while preparing to distort my mental state was one of the most painful moments of my life. This was the child I had raised alone, the one to whom I had devoted everything. "My mom has always been generous," he testified. "But lately she has become erratic and irrational. We believe outsiders are taking advantage of her." When Mr. Lawson cross-examined him, the mask slipped. "Mr. Hale, how much money have you received from your mother in the last 3 years?" "I do not know the exact figure." "Does $33,400 sound accurate?" "Maybe she has always been generous." "And how many times have you visited your mother without asking for money?" Silence loud and damning. "Is it true that you and your wife entered my client's home without permission and leafed through her private documents?" "We were worried about her." "Is it true that you brought a lawyer to pressure her to sign a power of attorney?" "We only wanted to help her manage her finances." At 35 years old, "Do you need assistance from your 71-year-old mother to pay your rent?" He could not answer with dignity. Mr. Whitaker then testified about my supposed erratic behavior, but when pressed for specifics, he admitted he had never spoken to me and that his claims were based on shallow observations. Dr. Lehman asserted that my refusal to undergo his evaluation proved cognitive decline until Mr. Lawson entered the full report from Dr. Moore, which entirely demolished his conclusion. Then it was our turn. Mr. Lawson first called Mr. Patel, my pharmacist, who explained how he had been misled into signing a paper that twisted my routine vitamin and aspirin purchases into something ominous. Dr. Moore testified to my excellent mental condition and presented the flawless cognitive test results. Mr. Rowan from the hardware store described my clear, methodical decisions and confirmed that canceling transfers and upgrading locks and cameras were prudent, not paranoid. Helen and my garden club friends spoke about my clarity, renewed vitality, and healthy social ties. At last, I took the stand. I rose with composure and walked to the witness chair, carrying the weight of 71 years' wisdom tempered by pain. Strength forged in adversity. Mr. Lawson guided me through my account, the $33,400 drained over 3 years, the humiliation of being excluded from the wedding, the steady emotional pressure, the invasion of my privacy, the legal threats. "Mrs. Hale," he asked finally, "why did you decide to stop financially supporting your son and daughter-in-law?" "Because I finally understood that what I received from them was not love." I said clearly, "It was a commercial transaction disguised as family. My money was welcome. As a person, was not." "Do you regret your decision?" I regret only that it took me so long. Daniel's attorney tried to cast me as confused on cross-examination, but I answered each question with calm precision. When he hinted that my new friendships had manipulated me, I explained that, for the first time in years, my relationships were grounded in mutual respect rather than financial interest. In closing, Daniel's lawyer insisted I was a puppet controlled by outsiders. Mr. Lawson's rebuttal was devastating. Your Honor, this is not the portrait of an incompetent elder, but of a woman who found the courage to free herself from years of financial and emotional abuse. The plaintiffs offer no real medical proof of incapacity, only frustration that their source of income has chosen to exercise her legal and moral right to protect her resources. Judge Hathaway retired to deliberate for 2 hours that felt like 2 years. When he returned, his expression was grave and unmistakable. After reviewing all evidence, he said, "It is clear to this court that Mrs. Margaret Hale is fully in possession of her mental faculties. Professional evaluations confirm cognitive competence. Her financial choices, however painful for her family, are rational and firmly within her rights." My heart pounded. Furthermore, the judge continued, "The record suggests this petition is driven by financial interest rather than genuine concern for Mrs. Hale's welfare. The court denies the request for guardianship in its entirety." I had prevailed. I had won not only the case, but my freedom, my dignity, and my right to live unburdened by the abuse of those who claim to love me. Outside the courtroom, I saw Daniel and Ivy arguing with their attorney. Ivy shot me a glare of pure hatred as she turned away. Daniel looked back once, for a breath. Something like regret crossed his face, but it was far too late. That evening, Helen hosted a small celebration at my home with all our friends. We raised our glasses to justice, to freedom, and to the fellowship of strong women who hold one another up. "Margaret," Alfreda told me, "today you did not just win a verdict, you won back your life." She was right. For the first time in years, the future was entirely mine. I could travel. I could love. I could create. I could live without fear, without guilt, without manipulation. 3 months later, I sold my house and moved into a lovely apartment near the city center. I donated half of my savings to groups that protect elders from family abuse. With the remainder, I began the life I had always imagined. I traveled through Europe, enrolled in art classes, and joined volunteer crews. I never heard from Daniel or Ivy again. Through others, I learned they had downsized to a smaller place and that Ivy held a job for the first time in years. Perhaps hardship would teach them what my generosity never could, the value of honest work and independence. Some nights, standing on my new balcony beneath the stars, I think of the woman I was 1 year ago, afraid, manipulated, convinced she had to purchase love. That woman is gone. In her place stands someone who has grasped a basic truth. True love has no price, and freedom is never too costly. My name is Margaret Hale. I am 72 years old, and I have finally learned that the most important person I must love and protect is myself. If this story moved you, feel free to support my writing so I can share more. Thank you in advance. And you, what would you do in this woman's place? I would love to hear your thoughts. So please share them in the comments and tell me where you first heard this story. For more life stories like this, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Many others are waiting for you. With heartfelt greetings until next time. M.